You've driven past rolling cornfields and grazing horses, perhaps lulled by the gentle hum of highway tires and daydreams of barbecue and bourbon, all while assuming that Kentucky's secrets are as simple as horse races and college basketball. But picture this. You turn off the asphalt and follow a gravel lane through a curtain of sycamores, the air growing dense with mist that clings to fields like a ghostly promise. You reach a clearing where the earth seems unnaturally raised, concentric circles faintly etched in the soil. And in that moment, you realize you've stumbled onto a puzzle that scholars, storytellers, and treasure hunters have chased for generations, yet still cannot fully explain. We're about to embark on a journey through time, tracing footprints carved into stone and whispers buried beneath layers of loam, uncovering discoveries so strange that they challenge not only our understanding of ancient North America, but our very notion of what is possible. By the end of our journey, you'll have glimpsed giant skeletons buried under mile-wide earthen mounds, traced trade routes that stretch from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes, and stared down legends of lost tribes and otherworldly visitors, all anchored in the heartland of a state better known for moonshine and bluegrass. We'll pose questions that echo through museum halls and dusty archives. Who built those enigmatic mounds at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi? Why were massive stones carved with symbols no one can fully decipher? How did people 4,000 years ago carve effigies so perfectly aligned with solstices that even modern astronomers scratch their heads? And, most perplexingly, what happened to the giants that once roamed these lands, as told in tales passed down through generations of settlers and native peoples alike? You're not a passive observer here. I'll speak directly to you. Together, we'll weigh the theories that range from the meticulously documented to the utterly fantastic. Was this a network of trade among indigenous cultures, or did seafaring voyagers from far-flung continents leave their mark? Are the giant bones catalogued in 19th century newspapers genuine relics of an extinct race, or misidentified remains of mastodon and mammoth? And if there were supernatural forces at play, curses that kept these secrets buried for centuries, what does that say about the interplay between myth and memory in the places we think we know best? I promise you big revelations. Artifacts long hidden in private collections, letters from early explorers describing phenomena so bizarre they sound plucked from Gothic fiction, and the latest in ground-penetrating radar data that reveals subterranean chambers no one expected. But I also promise questions that refuse to go away. You'll hear voices of academics who demand scientific rigor, alongside the raucous speculations of amateur sleuths and local storytellers who swear they've felt a presence in those mist-shrouded woods. You'll see glossy photographs of carved stone tablets alongside drawings from 19th century dime novels, each offering a glimpse of truth wedged between fact and fancy. In painting this landscape of mystery, we owe a debt to those whose work laid the groundwork. Archaeologists who brushed millennia of sediment from earthen structures, folklorists who recorded oral histories before they vanished, and everyday Kentuckians who preserved family tales of giants and dowsing rods long after the newspapers stopped printing their accounts. Yet for all that labor, we still don't have the full picture. Something about these sites defies tidy explanation, something that humbles even the most seasoned experts. We're left with fragments, a half-tablet etched with strange runes, a collection of arrowheads too uniform to be mere coincidence, and a mound whose perfectly spherical contours still baffle engineers. So here's my promise to you. As we wade into these mysteries, I'll never ask you to choose between science and wonder, or to discard skepticism for fantasy. Instead, I'll hold those voices in tension, letting the evidence speak through multiple lenses. We'll measure soil strata and carbon date charcoal fragments, then consider the legends of hill dwellers who claim to haven't aged a day for centuries. At times, the lines between myth and archaeology will blur, and that's the beauty of it. The world these ancients left behind is not a single story, but a tapestry woven from stone and story, geology and genealogy. Picture yourself walking the foggy trail at dawn, your breath visible in the cool air, the distant calls of sandhill cranes echoing across a hidden wetland. Imagine the shine of wet clay on your fingertips as you lift a broken vessel rim, its swirling patterns hinting at artists whose names are lost to us. Feel the reverberation in your chest when you stand atop a mound, aligned perfectly with the sunrise on the summer solstice, as if those builders left us a silent observatory carved from Earth itself. And then, just as you begin to feel certain that you understand what you see, the wind shifts, and you catch the echo of a legend. Giant skeletons unearthed in the 1800s, stacked like logs in a barn, only to vanish again into attics and basements. Still, for all the evidence, for all the painstaking work done by professionals wielding trowels and microscopes, an undercurrent of unanswered questions runs through every layer of this land. Who were these people? How did they transport tons of earth without wheeled vehicles? Did they chart the movements of stars and seasons with greater precision than we credit them for? And in the quieter moments, when the cameras are off and the academic papers are closed, what do local anglers and farmers whisper about those landforms that don't quite belong, those stones that hum with forgotten energy? As we step into the first of our deep dive mysteries, I invite you to bring your curiosity, your healthy dose of doubt, and the sense of wonder that draws us all to the unknown. We'll tread carefully, acknowledging the living descendants of those ancient builders and the weight of their heritage. We'll question the narratives that have grown around these sites, pulling apart sensational headlines from sober field reports. And we'll keep our minds open to the extraordinary, because sometimes reality outstrips our wildest tales. The questions are out there, waiting in the soil and the shadows. What you're about to hear is neither myth nor pure science, but a blend, a cinematic tapestry woven from hard data and human imagination. By the time we're done, you may find yourself standing at the edge of belief, peering into a past that refuses to be tamed. And you'll understand why, here in Kentucky's mist-laden valleys and forested hills, the ancient world still whispers its unsolved mysteries, challenging us to listen and to keep digging before those secrets slip away entirely. Picture yourself standing at dawn on the western bank of the Ohio River, where mist drifts across the water like spectral dancers, and the first gray light illuminates a series of low, rounded hills that don't belong, earthworks of a vanished people, their purpose still debated. This is the site of the Adena mounds, the grand, circular earthen monuments rising 10, sometimes 15 feet above surrounding fields, laid out in patterns so precise that modern surveyors still scratch their heads. Here, at what we call the mounds of the Ohio Valley, we confront a question as old as archaeology itself. Who built these great domes of clay and soil, and why? At the height of their construction, between 800 BCE and 200 CE, the Adena culture stretched from the Great Lakes down to the Tennessee River, a network of hunter-gatherers and early horticulturalists linked by shared pottery styles and mound-building techniques. These people labored without iron tools or draft animals, digging earth with deer shoulder blades and human elbow grease, dumping it in wooden baskets to create volumes of soil that, when added together, rival the pyramids of Egypt in overall tonnage. And yet, despite tireless excavations by Smithsonian teams in the late 1800s and renewed surveys by universities in the 21st century, central mysteries remain. Was each mound a grave vault, housing chieftains and shamans wrapped in deer hides and surrounded by copper ornaments? Or were they platforms for rituals, astronomical observatories aligned to solstices and equinoxes with an accuracy that modern astronomers still appreciate? Archaeologists have unearthed fragmentary proof for both theories. Human remains laid with stone tablet markers at the core of some mounds, while others contain post holes suggesting massive wooden structures once crowned their summits. Carbon dating tells us these ceremonies occurred around 100 BCE, yet the layering of soil, nearly a foot at a time, indicates that some mounds grew over centuries, each generation adding its own layer in a living memorial. And then there are the mysterious flint pipes, carved into human and animal forms, found in ceremonial pits at the mound's feet, hinting at rites of tobacco and communion with the spirit world. But here's where it gets tricky. The orientation of the largest mound at this site is off by a full 7 degrees from the point where the summer solstice sunrise should appear. Was this a calendrical shift, a local adaptation unknown to our textbooks? or merely an error of ancient surveyors who measured by eye and rod. Some researchers posit that the Adena were far more mobile than once believed, small family bands that gathered seasonally to build these mounds, dispersing afterward to forage and trade. Others argue for a centralized authority, a priestly class that marshaled communal labor across hundreds of miles, echoing structures like Cahokia further downstream. Which means we still don't know whether these mounds were monuments of scattered communities or the heartbeat of a kingdom lost to time. Legend has it that early settlers stumbling upon the mounds in the 1700s encountered skeletal giants in the burial pits, measuring over 8 feet tall, their bones so large they barely fit in the excavation tools of the day. Newspapers printed accounts of a giant race that civilized North America before even the Egyptians built pyramids. Modern scholars dismiss these tales as exaggerations of misidentified mastodon bones, but the persistence of the giant legend speaks to the aura these earthworks hold. Picture yourself brushing dew from the grass at dawn, the air cool and still, and feeling the silent weight of history pressing against your chest. What did those amplest of hands accomplish, and why did their mark vanish? Now, let's be fair. Soil chemistry analyses conducted in the last decade show no anomalous high-carbon deposits or lost materials beneath the mounds. No hidden chambers like those at Newgrange, no subterranean tunnels that tunnelers once swore they heard. Yet ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden features, shallow ditches encircling the mounds and concentric rings of post holes that form patterns only visible in aerial surveys. Still, for all the evidence modern science can muster, we've never found a single written record created by the Adena themselves. No script to decipher, no legend they inscribed in clay. Imagine yourself on a starlit night, lying on one of these earthen platforms, the Milky Way blazing overhead, and realizing that these builders may have charted that very sky, even as they left no direct testament of their methods. Might they have signaled with fires, aligning bonfires at equinoxes so that neighboring bands would know when to converge for seasonal feasts? Or did these circles serve as boundaries, channels controlling the flow of ceremonial processions, perhaps even the paths of the dead to the afterlife? We still don't know. And in that unknown lies our shared human wonder. Here, in the quiet fields of Kentucky, people long ago imagined themselves part of something larger than the woodland clearing in which they lived. They shaped the earth itself into symbols of community and belief, and then they vanished, leaving these mounds as silent sentinels. Their clay has weathered the centuries, but their questions remain alive, calling to us through the moss and grass. So as you stand among these ancient hills, remember that every footstep echoes a choice made thousands of years ago, and every breath mingles with the hopes of builders who dared to move mountains, one basket of earth at a time. We still don't know why. Picture yourself descending into a low-lying hollow not far from the Ohio's broad curve, where a brackish spring seeps salty minerals into the mud, and the air hangs heavy with the tang of ages. Here at Big Bone Lick, a place whose very name conjures visions of towering skeletons half buried in the clay, archaeologists first stumbled upon bones so colossal that Thomas Jefferson himself dispatched surveyors to catalog them in the late 18th century. These remains, dating back some 10,000 to 15,000 years to the late Pleistocene, belonged not to human giants, but to mammoths and mastodons that once roamed these woodlands, drawn by the salt that leached from subterranean deposits. Yet the lines between fact and folklore blurred swiftly when settlers whispered of giant men, entombed alongside prehistoric beasts, spurring newspapers to sensationalize a lost race who perished in local cataclysms. Evidence recovered from controlled digs has since clarified that indigenous peoples of the Paleo-Indian period visited these salt springs, collecting hides and using flint tools almost 12,000 years ago. The bones themselves, some fragments weighing over 100 pounds, reveal butchering marks consistent with human scavenging, suggesting these early Kentuckians feasted on the megafauna drawn to the lick's fatal allure. Yet key questions endure. Were these expeditions sporadic forays or part of a broader migratory circuit, linking Big Bone Lick to other major Pleistocene hunting grounds across North America? And why, as the climate warmed and those great beasts vanished, did native traditions come to imbue the site with supernatural significance? Speaking of water that bleeds salt and spirits lured by the songs of hungry bones, archaeologists have unearthed fluted Clovis points, distinctive spear tips dating to around 11,500 BCE, embedded near tusk fragments, reinforcing a picture of early human ingenuity and adaptation. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal hearths places campsites at roughly 10,800 BCE, just as the last glacial meltwaters raised the nearby ponds and streams. But then the trail goes cold. After perhaps a millennium of seasonal habitation, the archaeological record grows sparse, leaving us to wonder whether changes in game migration or shifting social structures drove people away, or whether rising sea levels and evolving ecosystems rendered the site inhospitable. We still don't know which forces tipped the balance. Now, let's be fair. Recent soil analyses detected elevated phosphate levels beyond what bones alone could produce, implying sustained human occupation or ceremonial use far longer than mere hunting excursions. A possibility that contradicts the long-held view of Big Bone Lick as a short-lived campsite. Ground-penetrating radar has unveiled post holes arranged in circular configurations, hinting at timber structures built to process hides or perhaps to host gatherings marking seasonal transitions. Some scholars argue that these timber circles formed an ancient calendar, a way to track solstices by the angles of sunrise through wooden pillars. Others counter that such patterns could simply be the imprint of humble but practical shelters. But here's where it gets tricky. What if those structures served dual roles, both utilitarian and ritual? Could the line between feast and festival have been as thin as a flint blade? Folklore offers its own tantalizing threads. Tales passed down by Shawnee and Cherokee elders memorialize a time when the Bone people walked the earth. Giant spirits who taught the first hunters how to strike the mammoth with thrown javelins. Some accounts speak of chanting around bonfires, the drums echoing across the marsh at night, stirring phantom shapes in the vapor. Settlers arriving in the 1700s heard these stories and reported hearing low, rhythmic echoes at twilight, an auditory phenomenon later explained by acoustic reflections off the salt flats. Yet to those pioneers, it felt like the footsteps of the past, a summons to remember. We still don't know how deeply such myths influence the archaeological record, whether ritual smoke altered soil composition, or whether songs left faint chemical traces in the peat. Picture yourself kneeling at the edge of that spring today, the muddy bank soft beneath your fingertips as you brush away leaves and uncover a tusk fragment half buried in silt. You breathe in the coppery scent of decayed bone, hold in your palm a piece of a world long vanished, and feel a shiver at the convergence of deep time and human curiosity. In that moment, you're both hunter and historian, drawn by the same salt lure that once beckoned mammoths, tracing lines of ancestry across millennia. And as the morning sun breaks through the trees, casting light on the ripple patterns in the water, you remember that these bones, once mistaken for giants, are reminders that our planet has hosted wonders we can scarcely imagine, and that the stories we tell about them shape our search for meaning. Still, for all the phosphate readings and radiocarbon dates, for all the oral traditions and acoustic studies, Big Bone Lick guards its final secrets. Who were those hunters who left flint shards beside tusks? Why did they return? Or did they vanish entirely, their campsites lost beneath centuries of sediment? And how did the mingling of native legend and European hearsay warp our earliest interpretations of this sacred place? We still don't know. But if you listen closely as the wind rustles the reeds, you might just catch an echo of those ancient drums, calling you to ponder the bones that lie waiting in the clay, and to wonder which mysteries remain buried, waiting for us to uncover once more.
Picture yourself crouching at the mouth of Mammoth Cave just as dawn's first light slips between the forest trunks, the air damp with limestone breath and the promise of hidden passageways. In that moment, you're not just a tourist, you're an explorer standing before the longest known cave system on Earth, over 400 miles of dark corridors, dripping chambers, and secret hollows that even now yield new tunnels to cave survey teams. But what draws us deeper than the dripping stalactites and yawning chasms are the enigmatic glyphs, symbols and pictographs etched on walls that no one can fully explain. One slender chamber, nearly half a mile from the natural entrance, bears rows of angular markings, lines, circles, and branching shapes that defy known Native American iconography. Scholars first documented these in 1843, noting that they spanned over 30 feet of wall and sat beneath calcite drips that have since glazed parts of the carvings, making direct dating nearly impossible. Archaeologists estimate that these glyphs were created sometime between 900 and 1400 C, based on preliminary radiocarbon samples of charcoal from nearby hearths and analysis of tool marks consistent with bone awls rather than metal. This places them in a period of regional upheaval when Mississippian chiefdoms rose and fell, when trade networks linked the central Mississippi Valley to the Gulf Coast and the Great Lakes, and when ceremonial centers flourished in what is now southern Indiana and western Kentucky. But the style of the Mammoth Cave glyphs, long rows of tree-like motifs intertwined with spiral suns, doesn't match known southeastern ceremonial complex art, nor the geometric motifs carved at Etowah or Spiro mounds. Some archaeologists propose they were made by a local cave-adapted group, a subterranean society, that used the cave as a ritual site, leaving these marks in initiation chambers where young initiates face darkness and silence as tests of courage. Others argue the shapes encode astronomical data, maps of star paths observed through cave skylights or solstice sunrise alignments at the cave's entrance. But here's where it gets tricky. The glyphs sit in two distinct layers. The lower band is crisp and sharply incised, while a fainter overlay of similar motifs arcs above it, as though a second hand retraced the original carvings centuries later. Does this suggest that the site remained sacred across generations, with initiates reaffirming ancestral markings? Or could it indicate an entirely different group, perhaps Mississippian priests traveling from far-flung centers, daubing their own symbols over earlier work as an assertion of power? Soil samples from beneath the first band date to around 1000 C, while microstratigraphy beneath the second hints at post-1300 occupation, coinciding with climatic shifts and the abandonment of other cave sites in the region. We still don't know whether these were layered by a single tradition evolving through centuries or by disparate cultures seeking to claim the same sacred chamber. Folklore adds another dimension. Local legend speaks of the Lost Ones, a clan said to have vanished into Mammoth Cave centuries ago, their leaders swallowed by the darkness during a ritual to commune with subterranean spirits. Early settlers near Flint Ridge recounted hearing distant drumming underground on cold winter nights, an echo some modern acoustic engineers attribute to air currents through narrow passages, yet to those pioneers it sounded like ceremonies still alive in the deep. 19th-century dime novels sensationalized tales of explorers finding wooden masks and bone flutes alongside the glyphs, suggesting a shamanic rite. No such artifacts have survived in museum collections, if they ever existed, but the stories speak to the cave's enduring mystique. Now, let's be fair, critics warn that these interpretations risk projecting sensational narratives onto ambiguous marks. The glyphs could be simple graffiti carved by bored saltpeter miners in the early 1800s, they argue, citing similar random carvings found near miners' camps within the cave. Yet the precision, repetition, and placement of the Mammoth Cave symbols, always in chambers too remote for casual graffiti, argue for deliberate intent. High-resolution 3D scanning has confirmed tool marks consistent with stone or bone implements, not metal chisels. And photogrammetry reveals that several spirals align with natural fissures through which sunlight penetrates only at equinox sunrise, an alignment almost too precise to be accidental. Still, the absence of accompanying artifacts, no pottery shards stamped with similar motifs, no charcoal smudges of ceremonial fires within the glyph-lined rooms, leaves open the possibility of a purpose lost to time. We still don't know what ceremonies, if any, these inscriptions accompanied. Imagine yourself tracing those spiral engravings with gloved hand, your headlamp illuminating patterns that could be star maps or clan crests. Feel the limestone cool and damp beneath your fingertips, the minerals undercutting your sense of order as you try to discern meaning in each loop and line. As you pause to listen, the cave's hush envelopes you, only the drip of water and the muted crunch of your boots on broken rock. In that silence, you sense the weight of generations pressing in, artists or priests who selected those chambers for reasons we can only guess, whose knowledge died when the glyphs lost their voice. Archaeometric tests on speleothem overgrowth show that parts of the carving began to be coated less than 1,000 years ago, evidence that people entered these passages long after first creating the glyphs, adding new layers of calcite that threatened to erase them. That suggests a tension between the sacred and the geological, a battle between human memory and the cave's slow reclamation. Did those who followed carve their own versions to renew the covenant with the spirits of the underworld? Or does the overgrowth mark an abandonment, a time when the rituals ceased and nature began to reclaim the walls? We still don't know. And perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what's there, but in what we haven't yet seen. Unmapped side passages sit beyond impassable squeezes, pockets of rock dust and stale air where mechanical crawlers have only just begun to probe. Ground-penetrating radar surveys hint at chambers void of human touch, walls yet uninscribed, waiting for the first real visitor in a millennium. What glyphs might they bear? What stories do those silent halls hold? And when new passages open to daylight, what bridges will they build between our world and the one that scrawled those spirals in the dark? We still don't know who, and why, someone reached into these depths and carved signs no living voice can fully interpret. But as you emerge back into the pale dawn, limestone dripping on your shoulders, you carry something of that wonder with you, the urge not only to explore but to seek understanding, to peer into the darkness with both skepticism and awe. In those cold, silent chambers, where stone meets story, the glyphs of Mammoth Cave stand as a testament to human curiosity, and the mysteries that endure when history refuses to speak clearly. We still don't know. Picture yourself stepping through a thin ribbon of trees into an open field carpeted with wildflowers, where clusters of unremarkable limestone boulders lie half-buried in grass, forming perfect circles that seem to hover between the soil and the sky. This is the Glasgow stone circles, 4 near-identical rings each about 30 feet across, arranged in a rough line that spans nearly a quarter-mile across rolling pastureland. At first glance, you might dismiss them as the work of a long-forgotten farmer's hedgerow, but these stones bear chisel marks on their undersides, tool scars cut with precision, and their layout aligns almost exactly with the cardinal compass points, hinting at a purpose beyond anything in local folklore. Archaeologists believe these circles date to roughly 1000 C, placing them at the twilight of the late woodland period, when indigenous groups in the Ohio River Valley were experimenting with mound building, elaborate pottery, and extensive trade networks. Radiocarbon samples taken from charcoal remnants found in shallow pits at the centers of 2 circles yielded dates clustering around 1025 C, suggesting deliberate clearing of earth before the stones were set in place. Yet the stones themselves are not local limestone. They originate from a ridge 20 miles north, requiring human carriers to drag or float them across tributaries and through dense forest. But here's where it gets tricky. No embedded artifacts such as tools or pottery shards have been found within the rings, leaving open the question of what rituals, if any, occurred there. One theory holds that these circles served as astronomical observatories, marking equinox sunrises when light would spill precisely through opposing gaps, illuminating the center of each ring. Experimental studies conducted in the 1990s showed that on the spring equinox, dawn light does indeed trace a path through the east-west stones of the third circle, spotlighting its center for almost 5 minutes, long enough for a brief ceremony or signal to another encampment. Yet that precision requires surveying skills and sightlines sustained across miles of forest canopy, skills archaeologists once believed late woodland peoples lacked. Alternatively, some researchers propose that the circles were gathering spots for seasonal communal ceremonies, perhaps linked to rites of passage or intertribal councils, where the empty centers allowed for fire pits and smoke signals visible to neighboring groups. Still, for all the evidence, we've never found a single tool or urn within the circles to confirm those gatherings. Legend weaves its own tale. Stories told by Shawnee descendants speak of spirit rings, where tribal elders would gather at moonrise, dancing around embers that glowed blue in the smoke. Early 19th century settler journals recount farmers stumbling on these stones and feeling sudden vertigo upon stepping inside the rings, a sensation later chalked up to damp soil prana or the result of soil-borne bacteria, but to those early visitors it was a sign of otherworldly energy. We still don't know whether these sensations were physiological flukes or deliberately induced through herbal incense burned at the stones' hearts. Now, let's be fair. Skeptics assert that many stone alignments exist in fields across North America, the product of glacial deposition or stray fieldstones pushed aside by plows. They point out that without accompanying mounds or rock art, the Glasgow rings could be natural formations misread by eager antiquarians. Yet a detailed survey in 2010 revealed that the stones share matching tool mark patterns, parallel grooves consistent with stone axes, and that each circle's center lies within a half-degree of perfect cardinal orientation. Ground-penetrating radar detected shallow, symmetrical trenches beneath two of the rings, suggesting intentional groundwork before the stones were placed. These trenches contained slightly elevated phosphate levels, hinting at organic activity, perhaps foot traffic or temporary wooden posts, that long ago decayed into the soil. Picture yourself standing inside the second circle at dawn, the horizons slowly erupting in pinks and golds, and feeling the stones at your back cool and ancient. Imagine closing your eyes as the morning breeze stirs, and sensing that the circle's geometry is a dialogue between earth and sky, a conversation you can join if you only attune your senses to the angles and light. In that moment, you become both observer and participant in a ceremony unseen for 1,000 years, your pulse in sync with the rotation of the planet and the silent witnesses carved in stone. There's also a darker whisper. Some people claim that livestock brought too close to the circles fall mysteriously ill, as if unseen forces radiate from the stones. Veterinary studies have found elevated levels of trace metals, iron and manganese, near the stones, raising the possibility of natural mineral leaching, but the tales persist. If the builders intended to channel earthly energies through these rings, whether celestial alignments or magnetic anomalies, we may never know. And in that not knowing lies the mystery that draws us back, decade after decade, to those flower-strewn circles. Were they observatories, council grounds, or shrines to forces we no longer understand? Did the people who set those stones speak of them in hushed reverence, or simply pass through on pilgrimages far older than written history? We still don't know. Picture yourself wading into the swampy backwaters of the Kentucky River Basin at first light, the air thick with mist and cicada song, as you near the faint outlines of wooden pilings poking through the muck like forgotten sentinels. This is the submerged village of Indian Knoll, its timber houses long since collapsed, their posts chewed by water, yet still telling tales of life played out here some 7,000 years ago. At its zenith around 5000 BC during the Middle Archaic period, native groups gathered on this floodplain, fashioning a community whose intricacies rival those of much later mound builders. Excavations in the 1950s revealed over 650 burials laid beneath floors, some cradled in woven mats, others accompanied by caches of freshwater mussel shells, objects so plentiful they hint at ceremonial feasting. Osteological studies show individuals suffering from arthritis and dental wear far beyond their years, painting a portrait of a people who labored hard but cared deeply, mothers cradling infants, hunters crafting outlaw darts, elders forming community councils and smoke-filled huts. But here's where it gets tricky. The spatial arrangement of these burials defies expected kinship patterns. Children lie beside elders who DNA analysis suggests weren't blood relations, pottery styles vary wildly from grave to grave, and isotope data hints that some individuals grew up hundreds of miles away along the Gulf Coast. Were these outsiders adopted into the tribe, ritual hostages, or traveling pilgrims seeking sanctuary and ceremony? And why did this vibrant settlement, bustling for nearly 2 millennia, gradually empty around 3000 BC, well before the rise of neighboring mound-building cultures? We still don't know whether environmental change, social discord, or the lure of richer hunting grounds drove them apart. Some archaeologists propose that Indian Knoll functioned as a seasonal pilgrimage site, where clans converge each spring to marry, trade, and renew sacred bonds, hence the diverse genetic signatures beneath its floors. Others suggest it was a refuge, a neutral ground where feuding groups could lay down arms and unite through ritual. Then there's the tantalizing possibility that this site marks the earliest known conference center in North America, where political leaders forged alliances that shaped the continent's prehistoric map. But in every model, we circle back to one question: why here, in this floodplain that would later challenge every settlement with capricious floods? Legend holds that the water spirits of Indian Knoll claimed those buried in sacred mounds, carrying their souls along hidden channels beneath the limestone bedrock. Local folklore tells of lantern-lit boats gliding silently across the river at dusk, carrying voices of the long-dead calling the living into the mist. Skeptics dismiss these tales as romantic fabrications, yet they echo the archaeological mystery. Places once full of life fall silent, leaving behind only scattered traces in bone and pottery shards. Picture yourself kneeling among the mossy pilings, cupping your hand in the murky water to feel the slick grain of mussel shell fragments, the elbows and shoulders worn smooth by centuries of current. Imagine pressing your forehead to a decaying floor beam, as if listening for the sighs of families who gathered here under bark-roofed dwellings, sharing stories and songs now lost to time. You become both detective and dreamer, waiting between data points and ghostly echoes. Still, for all the genetic analyses and isotope clues, for all the pottery classifications and osteological studies, Indian Knoll guards a final riddle. How did this extraordinary community dissolve, leaving no successor culture to claim its innovations? We still don't know what final moments saw these homes abandoned, these fires left to drown under spring floods. And in that not knowing lies our invitation, to remember that even the most vibrant societies can vanish without warning, their legacies buried just beyond our grasp, waiting for someone to piece together the fragments once more. As our journey through Kentucky's silent stone circles, mist-shrouded mounds, and submerged villages winds to a close, it's worth pausing to reflect on what ties these disparate wonders together: a shared human impulse to shape the world, to leave a mark that transcends our fleeting lives, and to seek meaning in earth, water, and sky. In the mounds of the Ohio Valley, we saw how generations added layer upon layer of clay, transforming humble slopes into soaring monuments of community memory. At Big Bone Lick, we watched hunters feast on Ice Age giants drawn by salt springs, blending survival with ceremony in a landscape at once lethal and sacred. Within Mammoth Cave's stony depths, cryptic glyphs remind us that some voices echo long after tongues fall silent, carved messages that challenge us to decipher their code. Across the Glasgow stone circles, we felt the precision of a people who measured angles of sunrise and sunset, orienting their rituals to the sun's path even as those rituals slipped from living memory. And in the watery remains of Indian Knoll, we encountered a thriving community whose genetic tapestry and burial customs defy simplistic categories, reminding us that identity in prehistory was as fluid as the rivers that nourished them. What unites these mysteries is a tension between permanence and vanishing, earthworks meant to last forever, and yet, over centuries, worn down by wind and rain. Stone inscriptions intended to record sacred knowledge, and yet buried by calcite drips and darkness. We trust that stone and soil carry truths across time, but each test of modern science, each layer peeled back by archaeologists, also reveals limits to our understanding. Carbon dates give us numbers, isotopes trace footfalls, and LiDAR maps show formations invisible at ground level. But never do these tools hand us a narrative as coherent as the legends whispered by hilltop shepherds and riverbank storytellers. In the end, we navigate between calibrated measurements and the flicker of imagination, acknowledging that the past is neither wholly recoverable nor purely imagined but exists somewhere in the interplay of fact and feeling. Throughout our exploration, we met competing theories that each hold a piece of the puzzle but none tell the entire story. Were the Adena mounds communal altars or chieftain tombs? Did Paleo-Indians at Big Bone Lick simply scavenge megafauna, or did they conduct elaborate rituals to honor life's great cycles? Were those cave glyphs mnemonic devices, star maps, or the graffiti of bored miners? Were the Glasgow circles carefully surveyed astronomical tools, or did they serve functions we cannot even conceive? Did Indian Knoll's inhabitants abandon their village because of environmental shifts, social discord, or a call to wander? Each question remains open, each hypothesis a doorway to new research and fresh debates. And yet, the questions themselves are gifts, reminders that human curiosity is unending, that the desire to ask why has driven us from the earliest stone tools to the most sophisticated drones mapping ancient landscapes. But beyond archaeology's methods and theories lies a deeper lesson about our own place in time. These ancient Kentuckians, whether they were architects of earth, carvers of stone, or keepers of drowned villages, faced the same imperatives we do: to feed families, to forge alliances, to find wonder in the skies, and to anchor their lives in rituals that connected them to something greater than themselves. They, too, felt the thrill of discovery when a new mound rose above the forest floor, or when a carved line revealed its secret as dawn's light shifted across the rock. In their own ways, they sought to understand the universe's rhythms and to leave signposts for those who came after. In that striving, they mirror us perfectly, even as their tools and languages have vanished. Consider how each site speaks across time to questions that echo in modern debates. The debate over mound builders' social organization resonates with today's discussions about community cooperation versus hierarchical governance. The interplay between legend and data at Big Bone Lick reminds us of the power and pitfalls of oral history alongside scientific evidence. The cave glyphs, layered one over another, suggest how traditions evolve, overlap, and sometimes overwrite each other, paralleling how modern cultures build on ancestral customs, even as older ones fade. The stone circle's alignment with celestial events invites us to rekindle our ancient bond with the sky, reminding us that despite skyscrapers and satellites, we remain creatures governed by sunrises, solstices, and seasons. And Indian Knoll's diverse genetic signatures whisper to us about migration, inclusion, and what it means to be part of a community, questions as urgent now as they were 7,000 years ago. These resonances are more than poetic. They call us to act as stewards of the past and citizens of the present. Every farm that plows through subtle earthworks, every land developer that ignores the faint outlines of burial mounds, risks severing a thread in that tapestry, emptying the soil of stories yet untold. Yet in each county fair where a local historian displays arrowheads or recounts legends, in each public talk where an archaeologist shares LiDAR images of half-buried rings, we see the opposite impulse: a gathering of curious minds, a commitment to weave science and story together. That gathering is itself a living ritual, an invitation to connect across time with those whose names we'll never know but whose visions shape the land beneath our feet. So where do we go from here? We keep digging, both literally and metaphorically. In labs, soils and bones await the latest isotopic analyses. In archives, journals and diaries penned by early settlers may yet yield overlooked details. In the field, new technologies, terrestrial lasers, drones, molecular paleosurveys, open doorways to discoveries our predecessors could only dream of. And in our imaginations, we continue to wander those woodlands, feeling the hush of dawn over the mounds, the echo of water dripping in cathedral caverns, the tingle of limestone under fingertips. Each of those sensations bridges our modern sensibility with the pulse of ancient lifeways. Ultimately, these mysteries endure because they rest at the boundary where human aspiration meets nature's vastness. They remind us that despite our urge to categorize, to explain, to master, there will always be corners of our world, and of ourselves, that defy neat answers. In those corners, wonder thrives, compelling us to ask new questions, challenge old assumptions, and honor the unknown with humility. It's a lesson that resonates far beyond Kentucky. Wherever humans have walked, they have left traces infused with possibilities, threads we can follow only by embracing both evidence and enigma. As we return from the mounds and the caves, from the rings of stone and the silted villages, let us carry with us not a sense of closure but an openness to the unknown. Let's champion preservation of these sites so that those who come after us, our children, our grandchildren, and scholars yet unimagined, can add their voices to the conversation. Let's blend the rigor of science with the poetry of myth, maintaining respect for descendant communities whose living traditions have roots intertwined with these ancient grounds. And above all, let's keep that spark of curiosity alive, that hunger to bend down, brush away the last fragment of earth, and peer into the past with wide eyes and an open heart. The stories of Kentucky's unsolved ancient mysteries remind us that history is not a closed book but a living manuscript, its pages scattered like leaves across fields and riverbanks, awaiting those who dare gather them into a narrative, and then dare question every line. As we tread lightly on these sacred sites, we honor the architects of earth and story who came before us. And as we press on with new tools, fresh theories, and ever-renewed wonder, we commit ourselves to a shared human endeavor, to listen to the whispers in the soil, to marvel at what we cannot yet explain, and to keep alive the possibility that the next revelation lies just beyond our current horizon. Keep digging, some secrets still lie just beneath your feet.